Welcome. I'm Andrea Olson with Go Diaper Free, and this is a recording of me recording podcast episode 138 on the Go Diaper Free podcast, where I'm talking about how to have an undisturbed and maybe even unassisted birth. I'm going to explain free birth today, so let's get started. Welcome to the Go Diaper Free podcast, where we're all about helping you stop depending on diapers as early as birth. I'm your host, Andrea Olson, author and mom of 5 babies, all EC'd from birth, all out of diapers by walking, and 2 born by free birth. This is episode 138, how to have an undisturbed and maybe even unassisted birth. Free birth explained. So you can read the written version of today's show, everybody, over at godiaperfree.com/138 and see all of the pictures and click all the links that I mentioned in today's episode. There are lots of pictures. I really hope you'll go by and check them out. I will also be replying to comments over there, so come on by when you're finished. All right, so across my 5 babies, which I had over the span of 8 years, I've had 2 unassisted births, 3 total home births, and 2 were quick hospital births where I spent about 30 minutes at the hospital. I labored at home for 4 hours, spent 30 minutes at the hospital, had the baby, and then demanded they let me go after 12 hours. So by far, I have to say my most enjoyable and satisfying births have been the free births. And you can see the full stories of my births on podcast episode and blogs as follows. Episode 16, my birth story, an almost unassisted birth. This one's a good one. That's Isadora. On the blog, my unassisted birth with Cooper. Episode 50, the unassisted water birth of our 5th baby full birth story. And I have had some people complain on my email list about sending out anything about birth at all because they've had traumatic births. So if that's you, please, you can skip over this one and go to the next one on EC next week. But I also want to repaint what birth can be and what birth should be, and hopefully provide a little snapshot of the healing that it can provide for those of you who've had traumatic births, those of you who've had good births and want to have even better births, or somewhere in between. This is all for you. So you can check out my birth stories if you want to over at godiaperfree.com/blog. Everything's in there. And there's a super cute little baby picture of Twyla right after she came out. She's got vernix on her body and everything in the bathtub. You can see that on the show notes. So for my 5th, who's Twyla, and final baby, yes, I'm finished, I'd hired a midwife because my husband and I were separated at the time. Everything was rocky and I really wanted support, so I hired a midwife. But she ended up quitting via text because she didn't want to drive an hour to an appointment where I didn't really see her as the one in charge. And we had had lots of talks about that. This quitting via text, though, alarmingly happened 5 days before my due date, you guys. You see, the midwife and I had agreed that she would help me have an undisturbed birth, one where she sat quietly somewhere in the house and would just be there in case I needed something, because I didn't know whether my husband would be at the birth or not. He ended up being at the birth, but at that time I didn't know. And she claimed to have agreed. She agreed on the surface, but perhaps deep down it really didn't resonate, where she wouldn't have the power in this relationship. But bigger than that, once I worked through a lot of anger, resentment, feelings of sisterly betrayal, I realized something huge over the next 5 days. The universe and God, they want me to have this baby unassisted. Then I remembered, oh, hey, I've already written the how to have a free birth manual. For goodness sake, I'm going to study up. So I pulled out this manuscript that I'd printed out when I was editing this book, Brave New Birth, that's just come out over the last 5 years. So I had this hard copy in my drawer and I began to refresh myself. I began to read through it. As I read, I also refreshed my husband, who is now back in the picture, with the Cliff's Notes version over the next few days. Like, hey, these are the red flags. These are when we would need a transfer to the hospital. These are things that are just normal. And otherwise, don't let me convince you to take me to the hospital like I did with number 2 and number 4, and so on. I mostly absorbed these nuggets that I found written in the how-to section of my book, Brave New Birth, which you can find at bravenewbirth.com. Here they are. So these are kind of like things to remember during birth and during labor to make things easier. Practice focused relaxation during contractions. So you're focusing on relaxing the parts that are contracting. And that's really kind of an oxymoron, but I think you understand if you've been in labor before. The next one is do not hyperfocus on every little new sensation. If you're like me and a very sensitive person physically, you can definitely do that, right? So we want to purposefully not diffuse our focus from that, right? When a new sensation comes up, just breathe. The next one, detach your mind from what your body is doing to get out of its way. So if we're trying to watch a kettle, it's going to take longer to boil, right? Same thing with the body. We want to sort of detach, kind of like doing yoga too. Like one of my teachers would say, I always did a lot of Ashtanga yoga in my 20s and I still do. And just imagine yourself floating above your body, observing. Is it really pain or is it just the way you're interpreting that sensation? So detaching your mind, basically getting out of the way, right? The fourth thing, if your body feels better when you do X, do X. Trust that. This feels good. I'm going to do it, even if it's not what you read you're supposed to be doing. If your body feels worse when you do Y, stop doing Y. That's pretty obvious, but seriously, if you're uncomfortable, it's not because birth is uncomfortable and labor is uncomfortable. It's because you need to stop doing whatever that is that's making you uncomfortable, the way you're sitting, the way you are, the room you're in, the level of the lights, the music, whatever it is. If it makes you feel worse, stop doing it. The next one, ensure that your physical environment and the people around you provide privacy, freedom, and support when or if needed. And that comes from you requesting. So plan ahead and protect the space. The people in your space during any type of birth should be sentinels to protect your privacy, freedom, and provide support if needed. And the last one, do not hurry, let nature take her course. I had some really cool sources that I researched for Brave New Birth, and a couple of them were like apocalypse time manuals on how to help a woman have a baby in a nuclear meltdown or something like that. And that last one's from one of those rare, odd books. Do not hurry, let nature take her course. All right, so those are the things that I really drilled down when I was studying my book in preparation for Twyla's birth. So in today's show, I'd like to tell you about unassisted birth. Also introduce my brand new book, which is finally available at bravenewbirth.com. We're also going to cover the 9 core principles of an unassisted birth, so we're all on the same page. And I want to say up front that you can apply this wisdom to any kind of birth, period, whether you're in the hospital or not. There's a neat picture of me still attached, or Twyla still attached to my placenta through the umbilical cord, me standing up in the bathtub about to get up after I had my little moment of collecting myself, and she's latched on, and it's just a beautiful picture. So you'll see that on the show notes at godiaperfree.com/138. Okay, so first, what is the definition of unassisted birth anyway? Free birth, undisturbed birth, autonomous birth. This is from my book. Any birth where the mother and baby are free to birth by instinct and are given the privacy and safety necessary for the body and baby to birth themselves without interference, intervention, or being watched or measured or observed. Now, this privacy can be as simple as a towel over one's face to tune out the room, or it can mean completely alone. This definition allows so many wonderful interpretations, you guys. It allows us to retain the option of having someone present at our birth if we want, and to still proceed with it undisturbed. It could be unassisted even with somebody present. We can still do it in a self-directed manner. It's like having a midwife over who simply knits in the corner, or giving birth at a natural birth center where everyone has agreed to provide full privacy to the mother during labor and only come when called. So in my research, I haven't found that unassisted birth is exclusive to being without a caregiver at home, although it often happens this way. For me, it was the lack of a hands-on hired birth professional, an OB or a midwife, managing my labor that identified my births as unassisted. One birth included my husband and my friend. They were there in the room or in the hallway, and one included just my husband. So now that we know what free birth is, let's next talk about whether you're cut out for this type of birth to DIY your labor and childbirth. So generally, if you don't have a pre-existing health condition or a pregnancy-related health condition, and you are interested in having this type of birth, great. Your body was made to do this. Your body was made to grow that baby in your belly. Your body knows what it's doing, whether you do or not. And this is from my book. This is from Grantley Dick Reed, who wrote Childbirth Without Fear. A woman, age 22, who had 3 deliveries previously, had an accident which caused complete paraplegia below the level of the 6th dorsal vertebra. She had fallen 15 feet through a trap door, holding a baby in her arms. She was 196 days pregnant. The accident resulted in complete motor paralysis. Absolute paralysis, both motor and sensory, so she couldn't feel anything down there. 64 days later, she came into labor and had a child weighing 5 pounds, 12 and a half ounces. During the first stage, the patient was quite unaware of what was going on during labor, feeling no pain whatever. At the end of this first stage, the contractions were strong and prolonged, with small weak ones in between them. There was no pain or discomfort. Second stage, contractions every 2 minutes, lasting 45 seconds approximately. Strong and useful, had descended well. She then stated she was conscious of a tight feeling, not painful, but which restricted her breathing. About 1.5 hours later, contractions were strong and there were more signs of distress in the patient. She complained of no pain and only experienced a feeling of tightness at the epigastrium. She held her breath involuntarily and cried out on expiration. The crying out was especially evident as the occiput emerged from under the pubic arch, so as the head was coming down under her pubic bone. These reactions to the late second stage contractions occurred in the absence of any pain or discomfort. Can it be correct, therefore, to assume that such reactions indicate pain or discomfort? So he's talking about these crying out and upon expiration, so breathing out and crying out. All of this, all of these physical pieces of proof that say, oh, she must be in pain or she must be uncomfortable. But is it just a reaction? Could it just be purely physiological? These are good questions. Grantley Dick Reed wrote an amazing book on that. It's kind of tough to read while you're pregnant, but still. All right, the next thing in my blog post over at godiaperfree.com/138 is a picture of me pottying Twyla with her fresh little umbilical stump on the very first day. And she's like smiling. I'm holding over the top hat potty in my bed. So you can go and see that. All right, so third, if you're not interested in having an unassisted birth, no worries. You can strive for an undisturbed autonomous birth instead by setting up the right caregiver, the right environment, and the right state of mind. You can request that your midwife, your doula, nurses, OBGYN, whomever, not disturb the natural process, not monitor nor check you unless you request, and limit the number of people in the room at any given time. You can have the lights turned down, music on, safety and privacy in any way you feel most inclined. Just like having a bowel movement, it is hard and unnatural to give birth in front of a room full of people staring at you in your private parts, or even in the presence of a single person at all. The sphincters simply operate better the less people in the room. It's the same thing when you leave the room when your baby's on the potty and they get a chance of a moment of privacy and their sphincters release. So if you're saying, oh, my hospital doesn't allow this, then throw a towel over your head and do what you can to make it as private and undisturbed as possible. All right, so fourth, how do we manage our own prenatal care if we're doing an unassisted birth or not? What do we outsource and what do we do ourselves? And this is specifically focused to if you're planning to do a free birth and you know who you are if that's you. My new book outlines all of this. There's no way I can fit this into a tiny little podcast. And it explains all the testing, all the options, the full menu of prenatal care, including exactly how to do a self-check at home. And like all my other books, it comes with a video library and things like that where we demonstrate things for you. All right, the fifth and most important thing to learn is basic birth biology and the flow of birth. We are not born knowing this. Nobody's taught us this. Knowledge is power, and with this knowledge comes absolute freedom. So for any type of natural birth, you'll want to learn about the tension, fear, pain cycle. In other words, if you're tense, you're going to be afraid, you're going to feel pain, all of that. Sorry, the fear, tension, pain cycle. The first thing is you're afraid, and then you tense up, and then you get pain. So in other words, relaxing in order to have to avoid pain at all in the first place, that focused relaxation I was talking about earlier. You're going to want to learn about what certain sensations mean is going on in your labor so you can really get out of the way. And you're going to want to know the flow of the birth process and how not to disturb it. Like after your baby comes out, every movie or every birth or whatever, you've heard all this stuff about how, oh, you just have to have your baby on you immediately. No, there's actually a pause after the baby comes out where the mother collects herself. And typically in traditional societies, the baby is laid face down on a mat in these situations. I'm not saying this is what you should do at all. And none of this is medical advice. So I have a disclaimer on my website, everywhere else. I'm not responsible for your journey. You are. And I'm not a doctor or a midwife, but I've done a lot of research and I've read a lot about how the mom will just put the baby down, face down. You know what that does? So first of all, the placenta is draining all the blood in through the umbilical cord to that baby. So they're getting massive download of blood into their body. And the other thing is they're face down, the way they come out, that baby, all of the phlegm and mucus and stuff and the fluids are coming out naturally. And the mother has this natural this is just a natural phenomenon that happens that people have observed in undisturbed birth, where she's pausing and collecting herself because this massive thing just happened. And then it occurs to her to pick up her baby. If somebody else isn't catching it and stuffing it onto your chest and all of that, that is usually what happens. So just a little note about that. So it's neat to understand the flow of the birth process when undisturbed. It doesn't mean that's how your birth has to be, but it's interesting to know that because we don't learn this in school. It's also interesting to learn what the muscles and hormones are doing and when. Just a little bit, just enough, not to overwhelm, but just to get an idea. And how in the heck the birth canal works. The sacred geometry of it. It's amazing. So trust me, all this biology information is essential. Just that minimum, basic understanding of it. It's not taught in schools, but this knowledge can free you from unnecessary pain, transfer, and self-doubt. Knowing your body and this natural process happen with or without you, and what this or that sensation means is really key to an autonomous, fulfilling birth. Again, with or without a caregiver. The next image on my blog post over at godiaperfree.com/138, where the transcript of this episode is of Twyla. I've got a birth certificate PDF that I include with my book, Brave New Birth. And none of the other birth certificates you'll find online, the templates are not made for home birth, unassisted birth, really. So I've got this little ink pad, and I've got Twyla's foot on it, and I'm about to press her foot onto the birth certificate. It's pretty neat. You can look at that picture there. All right, sixth. Here are the 9 core principles that I mentioned earlier that will be helpful for you to internalize. We are mammals is the first one. And there are explanations about each of these in my book, Brave New Birth. But mammals all birth the same. We all need privacy. And we humans are mammals. Let's just name that. Number 2, birth shouldn't hurt. Like the paraplegic example, or somebody who has a heart issue and isn't allowed to push. If you don't have fears placed there by the media or whatever, your impressions, and you don't tense up, you're not going to have pain. Privacy is everything. It literally is everything. It's also literally everything with EC and pottying your baby. And when they start to resist, privacy is so important. Number 4, every body sensation has a purpose. Things don't happen randomly. They all have purposes, and they're all information. Number 5, every labor is unique. So although I teach about the flow of birth in the book, it doesn't mean that's what yours is going to look like. Every labor is different because of a variety of reasons. Education, and by the way, that's why you should have your own labor inform you. Your own labor tell you what to do in that specific labor. All 5 of mine were totally different. The next one, education is your ally. So learning about the biology of the body is essential. I mean, it is something that has helped me so much, just understand and not have any fear, or tension, and pain in my labors. Not all of them, but the ones that were free births. And those, by the way, were only 75 minutes each. They were amazing. All right, most labors are normal. Most emergencies are clear. So during labor, there are 4 things that can happen that say, hey, transfer to the hospital. During pregnancy, there's a handful more. And in postpartum, there's a handful more. But during labor and everything takes about, if you get to the hospital within 10, 15 minutes. And again, this isn't medical advice or anything, but I've collected all this information from Ina May and various other folks. Emergencies are super clear. And if you have an emergency, you'll know. But most labors, one of my teachers, Wapio from the Matrona, would throw out a number of 95%, are going to be normal. if you don't disturb the process. It's when we start messing with the process. And if you haven't seen Ricky Lake's movie, The Business of Being Born, definitely see that to see how the well-meaning, I suppose, interventions in the hospitals that are standard actually cause a lot of problems in labor. But most labors are normal if they're undisturbed. And the next one, looks like there's more than 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Number 8, the caregiving network can be your ally. So those of us who are doing free births don't think that the medical system is evil. I mean, it's there if we have an emergency. So by golly, we're going to use it if there's an emergency. That's how to birth responsibly with autonomy and responsibility, right? So, and yeah, some people I like to do the Harmony test, the blood test shows me a lot of things about my baby. So I know what to expect, including the gender. I sometimes would want to know that. I'd want to do an ultrasound sometimes just to double check what my intuition was already saying. Some women don't want any of that. If I break my arm, I'm not going to want to go free birth style on my arm, broken arm. I'm going to go to the emergency room and get somebody to set my bone. But when it comes to birth in my body, I am the expert. So yeah, there's a place for everything for sure. And then the last one, the 9th one, is homeostasis rules. So whenever things get out of whack or just a little bit off normal in a birth, there is, if you give it some time and you listen to your body and you get into whatever position your body wants or take care of yourself in whatever way that's occurring to you, your body gets a chance to go back to homeostasis. So it's always rebalancing itself. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes less time. And 7th, did you know? Oh, you do know because I already told you that there are only 4 reasons to transfer during the hospital during labor. Each needs attention within 15 minutes. So if you live near a hospital, that might ease your mind just in case. You can download my handout, the little free handout I have, the 4 red flags of labor, over at the show notes. Go to diaperfree.com/138. So that's an example of one little download that comes with my book, Brave New Birth. So, and there are also a handful of what we call variations from normal that if given some time and space, changing positions, etc., will typically normalize on their own. These are not emergencies. A chart outlining all of these variations comes with my book as well. So you and your partner, if any, can sort of prepare yourself for, hey, what's an actual emergency and what's actually just a variation from normal. And if you just want to labor at home for as long as possible and then have your midwife or doula or go to the hospital as late as possible during your labor, this information can really help you because then you'll know during labor, hey, everything's going cool. We're just going to stay at home for a little longer and just sort of ride this out. A chart outlining all those are in the book. Then there's a little picture of little Twyla right after she was born. And I think I had already birthed the placenta. No. The cord had stopped pulsing. So once the cord stopped pulsing, I didn't want to do a lotus birth where you keep the placenta by you the whole time. So my husband cut the cord. So we tied it off with a boiled shoelace, just a white shoelace. I mean, some people say all you need for birth is a shoelace, basically, and some kind of cutting apparatus. So there's a picture of him cutting it over on the show notes that you can see. Last, I just want to remind you that you can apply any of these unassisted birth aspects, techniques, ideas to your unique labor at home or in the hospital, planned or emergency, with or without a caregiver. Privacy, a true knowledge of what your body sensations mean, and making sure no one disturbs the process, if at all preventable, are all things that are possible in any environment. You just need to use discernment ahead of time, know your medical rights, and assert yourself. And by the way, if you're in a hospital, the person who gets to decide your rights is your husband. I swear to you. That's just the way the doctors and that system works, as wrong as it feels to me. Like the woman who's birthing should be the one who has sort of the legal weight, but the men really do. So, and for all of you who are in same gender relationships, also just ask, like in the middle of labor, what can we expect? Like, who's going to actually have the voice to speak up for me? Do I need to have a doula? Do I actually get the voice? Does the woman get the voice? Because they see the woman as kind of out of her mind during that time. Although I've always experienced labor as being super clear about what I want. But that is an old stigma that still happens in the hospital, just so you know. Even more reason to do it at home if you want to. Okay, so Use discernment ahead of time. Make the plans to protect your privacy and space and to learn about things. Know your medical rights and assert yourself. You, if you are feeling drawn to free birth, can totally do this. It's just a matter of preparing. And then even after all the preparation, maybe you decide you want a different kind of birth and there's just aspects you'd like to do. If you'd like to learn more, please pick up my new book, Brave New Birth, at bravenewbirth.com. There's also an audiobook version, an immersion course, one-on-one support. My friend down the street, JD, she's a lay midwife and doula. She loves providing support to people. She's going to be running that part of our members, our book owners area. There'll be birth pods around the world and online where you can have prenatals together, and a podcast. This is all forthcoming. So for now, just grab my book and the videos that come with it and start joining that community there. And now I'd love to hear from you. Are you considering a free birth? Will you perhaps apply some of what's in the new book to your upcoming birth? Please comment over at godiaperfree.com/138. Head over and let me know what you think. I'll see you over there. Till next time, happy pottying, y'all. I'm Andrea Olson, and you've been listening to the Go Diaper Free podcast at godiaperfree.com. So there you go. Please comment below if you are planning a free birth, if any of this can be applied to your own upcoming birth, labor, whatever. Do you have questions, comments, all of that stuff? Please write in the comments below, but also hit the like button so that more people hear about this wonderful thing, and subscribe so I can let you know when my next video is out.